Trespassing in a Child's Head Unwillingly by Kitty Cat on AO3. Chapter 24, An Ambush. The tape stretched, creaking loudly as Izuku cut the end off it. He pressed the tape flat against the edge of the last box, rocking back to sit on his heels. The tape had run out, but he was finally done. All of his All Might merch was packed into boxes with like items and labels on the side. He had left Kacchan's stuff alone, and any joint item they had was piled up on the bed. But all the stuff he had gotten from birthdays or Christmas, or any time his father had sent gifts, it was all All Might. He opened his phone, checking Kacchan's messages first. Nothing. He had read Izuku's last text telling him to enjoy his internship, but Kacchan hadn't responded. He was probably busy. Shrugging, Izuku switched over to his marketing app, letting the small bar load all the way. There were over 50 replies already, for only around 10 being spam. He didn't need this stuff anymore, a physical reminder of the father who had left him. Maybe some other absent father would buy something for his kid. Izuku shook his head, setting his phone down to smack his cheeks. It was still early in the morning, and he didn't need to start getting ready for school for another hour. Sleep had been difficult. The others constantly watched him as if he was just going to snap at any moment, and the All Might merch had all gone first. Now his carpet just felt empty. He hadn't bothered to fill it with anything else. The fact that he even could was just another reminder of his father. There was a small knock on the door, and he jumped, standing up right as it creaked open. "Zuku? Baby?" his mom asked, peeking her head in. She went to say something else before pausing, shutting the door behind her. Izuku kept his eyes down as she sat beside him, running her fingers over the edge of the box. "All Might limited edition figures?" she read. "Izuku, why are all these in a box?" Her breath caught in her throat, and Izuku's fists tightened. "I'm selling them," he confessed. "All of my All Might merch." She took her hand off the box slowly, her eyes downcast to her lap. "Oh," she whispered, before looking up at him. "Why? I thought he was your favorite hero." "He was," he confessed, emphasizing the past tense. "But not anymore. I'm not a child who adores him." She didn't say anything for a moment, just staring at his face. She gently pushed a curl out of his face, but he pulled back out of her touch. "Did he do something to you, Zuku? Something at school? Did he say anything? Please?" "No, Mom," Izuku said, standing up quickly. "He didn't do anything to me. I'm just tired of being a fan of his, okay? He doesn't deserve it." He turned on his heel and left, shutting his door behind him a little harder than he meant. Why wouldn't she just tell him? Why had she kept it a secret from him for years? He deserved at least to know who his father was, didn't he? "I'm taking a shower," he muttered, not caring if she could hear. Hikage yawned as he walked down the street, putting his hands in his pockets. His hand grazed Izuku's mace in the pocket. Inko had told him to start carrying it after he had been grabbed by that kidnapper, but he hadn't had a reason to actually have it with him, as Katsuki had always been next to him. But Katsuki had gone off to his internship late last night, and his hero sponsor wanted him to stay the night. None of them had spotted Katsuki at school that day, but he had texted saying he had extra training. It was whatever, except who he had decided to intern with. All Might was bad, like the worst case scenario, but Night Eye was pretty close to the top of that list. He had known about All Might for some time, and then he had viewed his future. Whether or not it had already passed was unknown. What was known was the grudge Night Eye held for All Might. They had all seen it coming when he told the man the truth of the quirk. Still, Katsuki was strong, so even if the hero was grilling him, he wouldn't say anything. Like father, like son, telling people who didn't need to know about the quirk. Hikage paused, searching the area in front of him. His hair stood on end as he stepped to the side, out of the way of the passing pedestrians. He tightened his grip on the mace as he stepped into the nearby corner store, the bell announcing his arrival. "Oh, morning, Midoriya," the woman behind the counter called, smiling at him. He looked back, walking over to her. "Hey," he glanced down at her name tag before looking back up again. "Tara?" He leaned onto her counter right as the bell above the door rang again. He looked up at the cameras, watching a small man disappear behind the shelves. "How's your mom?" Tara asked with a smile. "She hasn't stopped by in a bit." "She's good," Hikage mentioned, watching the man appear and disappear down a different aisle in the cameras. "Tara, is there anyone else in the store?" he whispered. She paused, shaking her head slightly. "My supervisor is on break. What are—" She paused, moving to turn around, but Hikage grabbed her arm. "Are you okay?" "2 of these," Hikage said, grabbing 2 packs of gum from the shelves below him. She hesitated, but nodded, ringing them up. "You're not gonna, rob me or something, right, Midoriya?" she asked with a small laugh, but her hand shook slightly as she took the cash he handed her. He shook his head before bowing it slightly. "Keep the change, Tara," he said before turning to the door. He let it swing shut behind him, pushing into the commuters as they moved in the opposite direction. Worst case scenario, it was someone who knew Izuku's connection to All Might, or someone who knew that man that Izuku had taken Eri from. Izuku had a lot of people who would want him dead, and they all had more. But his pursuer wasn't large. If it came down to it, judging by the chill still running down his back, it would. He probably could take the man out. He hadn't been a hero like his counterparts, but there was a time when he could shoot a deer in the heart with deadly precision, or run for hours on end just for the hell of it. He knew how to take down people who had tried to mess with his shed, or stupid teenagers who had just wanted to trash things or shoot animals for no reason. He stepped to the side, into a small alley, as he made one more choice. He clicked on the first contact he had last spoken to, fairly certain it was Katsuki. He sent his location with a tap before shutting off his phone and stepping further into the alley. The small man appeared, a hood drawn over his face. He couldn't have been much taller than Izuku's hip, and judging from the hunch he had, he wasn't a fighter. So then why? Before he could finish the thought, his heart dropped. The man jumped, moving with such speed that Hikage only stumbled to the side at the last moment. He took the mace from his pocket and popped the lid off with one hand. But the attacker was faster, using the wall as a jump pad to kick the mace from his hand. "Fuck," Hikage murmured, flexing his fingers. He ducked out of the way of another foot, stumbling forward until he pushed a foot back for better support. He felt a slight pull to the right and moved accordingly, reaching up and grabbing the man's ankle. He managed to throw him off, but the sudden momentum made Hikage jerk forward and drop the man's foot. He hit the wall again, arcing over Hikage's head. His hood moved in the wind, and Hikage caught the slightest hint of an odd smell. He dropped before the man could swing back, ducking and rolling to the side. He grabbed the last thing in his pocket, tossing the gum at the man as he moved towards Hikage again. He caught it midair, his fast momentum slowing. "Double bubble gum?" the man asked, looking down at the small piece in his hand. "Your favorite?" Hikage asked, and the man looked up. He laughed slightly, pulling his hood back. "How the hell did you know that, kid?" he asked, looking him up and down. The man was old, his gray hair balding at the top and his face lined with wrinkles. Hikage hesitated, forgetting briefly he wasn't supposed to know Shorahiko. "It was all I had," he shrugged, turning to walk away. Whatever the man wanted, he wanted no part of it, and Izuku had decided the same. He heard the man's footsteps before, but he didn't react fast enough to dodge the smack to the back of his head as Shorahiko used the wall as a jump board. "No," Hikage muttered, rubbing his head as he rejoined the crowd. The retired pro followed beside him without saying anything, a limp in his step. If he didn't know the man, he might think he was just a senile old grandpa. That, and the fact he was somehow keeping up with Hikage's fast walk. It was at the third left turn that the man finally made a noise, a small laugh. "Going in circles, are we?" Hikage frowned, looking down at the man. "What do you want?" "Huh?" he asked, touching his hair. "I'm old, kid. You're gonna need to speak up." Hikage frowned, but didn't say anything else. Shorahiko had done the same trick on Toshinori before kicking the shit out of him. "I know where you live," he said, huffing. "Can we cut this out?" Hikage sighed, but turned down the right street, stopping before almost smacking into 3 of the 1A girls. Ashido stumbled into him, tripping over herself. "Oh my god, 7! Izuku, who—" she muttered quickly before looking at Shorahiko. "I swear to God, if you hurt them, I'm going to burn you," she warned, holding a hand up. Yaoyorozu nodded, holding what looked to be a stick in her hand. Uraraka did the same, cracking her knuckles. The rest of the girlies are on their way, she said, nodding at Hikage. He cursed, pulling open his phone. It was flooded with worried texts from the 1A girls, all demanding to know what happened and stating they were heading over. Katsuki was his second most recent contact. It's fine, he said quickly, holding his hands up. Ashido frowned, dropping her hands. It's 4, he mentioned as well. Oh, Ochako said, frowning. Are we sure we aren't hitting anyone? Hikage grabbed her arm, pulling her out of the way as a t-shirt and jeans came running, stopping right where Ochako had been. Are we fighting the old man? Higakure asked. Can I get water for anyone? Inko asked, tapping Nana's shoulder. Hikage had switched out to her the instant they had arrived back at the house and had gone into the bathroom for a moment. It made more sense since she knew the people more, including Hiko. I would love some, Miss Midoriya, he said, smiling at her sweetly. Nana wanted to reach out and grab his hand, apologize for leaving him with Toshi, apologize for everything she had done by putting him in danger. He was her dearest friend, and had been by her side as long as she could remember. He had been the one to introduce her to Ren, the love of her life. He had been his best man at their wedding, and had been there when they learned she was pregnant, and he had been with her when she had to leave, to close the door and never come back, in order to keep them safe. Though it had only been a week away from them when she had been killed, he had been with her that entire time. Let her crash with him, let her cry in his arms, and then he had taken her mentor in, trained him like he was his own, devoted his entire life to her legacy and what she believed in, and all she could do was watch him. She couldn't even thank him for those years or share stories with him. She had no right to, even if she could. She had just left him, just like she had left her family. Something touched her arm, and she jumped, spinning around to look at the 6 girls piled onto one couch and the floor. You feeling okay, Seven? Sue asked, tipping her head. Her and Kyoka had come once they had reached the house, claiming they had to fight to get away from their heroes, which was concerning. I'm fine, she said, laughing slightly. Anyways, why aren't you all with your heroes? Internships are right now. Momo shrugged. We thought you were in danger. Of course we're going to help. Inko laughed as she handed out cups of water before ruffling Nana's hair. It was just strange sometimes to be in the body of her son. Little touches that weren't meant for her, but rather an afterthought. The little moments between a mother and son that they had interrupted for all of Izuku's life. I'm glad to see that Izuku and them have such nice friends, she said, sitting in the single chair across from them. Are you all in his class? Ashido stuttered before Toro spoke. Nope, we're in class 1A, but Ashido introduced us to Seven and we fell in love. She's so funny and so smart. She's the best when it comes to relationship advice. She bragged, leaning back into Momo's legs, her cup bobbing in midair. Oh, Inko said with a small smile. Well, it's nice to know that he has strong friends to look after him. She paused, glancing over before looking away. They all do. It was silent for a moment as Nana shifted uncomfortably, trying not to make eye contact with either adult. She could feel how upset Inko was. She knew that Izuku knew the truth now, even if she wouldn't admit it, and she knew they had told him. Hiko coughed, setting his cup onto the coffee table. I'm so sorry, but was I under the wrong impression? I mean, and I don't mean to sound old here, he quickly clarified. I'm not here to judge Midoriya, but I was under the assumption he was a boy. Is that not? It was silent for a moment before Nana snorted, quickly covering her mouth as she tried to conceal it as a cough. He raised an eyebrow at her as she kept coughing, trying to ignore his dumbfounded look. Jiro rubbed her back slowly, looking around the room. Yeah, Inko said, shaking her head. I'm so sorry, Mr. Torino. I thought I had cleared this up when we spoke earlier. Izuku has... She hesitated as Nana finally composed herself. She searched Nana's face for something, but she pressed her lips tight, shaking her head. He has dissociative identity disorder. Right now, this is Seven. She's an alter of his. He blinked at her in confusion, frowning. Seven? Now what kind of name is that? Mine, Nana said quickly. Why did you follow me here after attacking me in the alley?" "He did what?" Inko asked loudly, looking up at him. He laughed slightly, holding up his hands. "Well now, calm down. I was just trying to speak to Midoriya. Train him early." He shook his head, eyeing Nana. "I think Izuku made it clear that we want none of your training," she said. "Leave us alone now." Jiro bumped her shoulder and she glanced over to them. "I thought you wanted into 1A. At least, didn't Izuku want that? Isn't this helpful?" The other girls nodded. Nana hesitated, glancing up at Inko, who watched her carefully. They've changed. We are perfectly okay with Izuku staying in Class 1C. She looked back to her old friend, who frowned. "Now, I'm going to have to ask you to go." Inko held her hand up, standing up. "I'm sorry, Seven, but I asked him to come by. He can help you more than anyone else. She stumbled over the words, looking at all the girls before shaking her head. She wiped her hands on her pants, walking into the kitchen. "I'd like you to intern with him, just for the week." Nana shook her head. "Look, we've talked and we've made a decision. I'm sorry, Hiko, but I'm not—" "What did you just call me?" Hiko asked, leaning forward. Nana hesitated, looking between them. Torino. That's what Inko called you, wasn't it?" She tried to cover. "No," Ochako muttered. "She called him Mr. Torino. You're Grand Torino, right?" Ashido turned to raise an eyebrow, and she laughed. "Look, I'm a fangirl just as much as anyone else. He trained our teacher." Hiko nodded. "That's right. I met him through an old friend. One who called me Hiko." He raised an eyebrow at Nana, who stood up quickly. He wouldn't know. The whole situation was simply ridiculous, and they had all been smart about it. "Seven, please," Inko said as she neared the kitchen. "Just for a week, and then we can figure this out." Nana looked back at him and the 1A girls who had heard everything. If she did decide to not take the offer, it would look suspicious, especially after Izuku had said all that about wanting to be a hero, idolizing them. And Inko already knew Izuku knew. Maybe this was a mother's way of trying to patch things up. She sighed, running her hands through her hair. "Yeah, okay, fine, just for a week," she agreed, looking up. Hiko didn't smile, but he did nod, his eyes narrowing. "I'm going to speak with Miss Midoriya. I'd prefer to do it alone." Nana chuckled slightly, nodding. "You guys want to see Katsuki's plush collection?" she asked, looking at the 6 girls. Their eyes widened as they fought to scramble up first. Nana cast one more look at Hiko and Inko before she turned to follow them into the room. "Your mom filled me in on the situation," Hiko said, sitting forward on the couch. "But I don't think she knows the truth. Does she, Nana?" Nana's fist tightened in her lap as she looked away from Hiko. They had discussed this last night. She was the first chosen to speak to him because they all knew he knew. She was his closest friend, so it was only a matter of time before she slipped up. Better to deal with it now than later. "You understand the importance of not letting this slip out, right, Hiko?" she asked, crossing her arms over her chest. He laughed, leaning back into the chair. "I'm not senile quite yet, Nana. So what are you doing in a 15-year-old's body?" She laughed slightly, looking down at the kid's hands. "Yeah, right. It's a long story, Hiko, and it goes into the Quirk, more than I think you were ever made aware of." He nodded, groaning as he stood up. "Suppose the Elder Act won't work on you, huh? So go ahead and explain. I'll listen before I start beating some sense into you. Or the kid, whatever." He threw his hands up, opening up his fridge and grabbing some food. She chuckled. "How's the kid doing?" "Not Izuku. Toshi." "Haven't seen him in a while," he admitted. "Now talk." Well, another one of my ones that's probably just over 20 minutes. I need to edit them together because there was one moment I slipped up and had to re-record a section. But I think it's around 20 minutes. Let's see. Anything about this one that I really want to focus on? Izuku getting rid of all his All Might stuff. Okay, so it's really important to realize that at this point, he is making a very firm distinction of his father versus All Might, because figuring out that they're not one and the same, it's he's 15. It's hard for him to really piece this together. I mean, he's doing an awesome job of it, but it's still difficult for him. So he's getting rid of all his All Might stuff, so it's less harmful. And Katsuki will get rid of his too. I don't know if I wrote that in. Katsuki gets rid of his too when he gets back from the internship, because he doesn't want Izuku to have to deal with that. Because, you know, he's smart. He understands this stuff. Let's see. I think that's it. Oh, the girls running away from their heroes is just such a funny concept, because I imagine their heroes just panicking because they lost their internship students, and their internship students are just talking about Katsuki's plush collection. They probably got in quite a bit of trouble for that. I think that was really it, though. The next one is called Gran Torino, and it is about the internship work study. It says work study, but I think it's the internship. Anyways, thank you guys so much for listening, and I will see you at the next one.